So welcome everybody who's live and also those joining the recording. This webinar is all about forgiveness. And I already feel myself laughing, which is probably a strange thing when we're talking about forgiveness, because it can often seem like a heavy kind of topic. But it really doesn't have to be, is what I'm seeing more and more and more, that it is just something that's can be very easy and natural, and doesn't have to be this heavy thing that sometimes we think about forgiveness. So I'm Sara Sanderson, for those of you who don't know me, and I run a Facebook group called Tea and Insights. And it's basically an exploration group all about exploring what and who we are and how this human experience works from the inside out through the gifts of mind, consciousness and thought. I'm not going to go into all of that on this call. If you want to find out more, then please do join the group if you're not already a member. But today I'm with Jill Whalen, who's our guest host, who's going to be mainly sharing what she's experienced around this topic of forgiveness, and really looking forward to people asking questions and sharing their experiences as well. This is a conversation, it's not a lecture by Jill. So yeah, Jill, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself before we get into the conversation, that would be wonderful. So over to you.
Thank you, Sara. Yes, so I'm Jill Whalen. I write the blog whatdidyoudo.com, and have a book about anxiety out there called Victim of Thought. So that's my intro. I've been sort of have learned this same understanding Sara's talking about for about a little over 4 years now. And that's pretty much why I spend my time writing about it and talking about it. Should I jump right into the forgiveness part, or yeah, okay. So forgiveness. I wrote a blog post about this a couple weeks ago, at which you can see. I think Sara posted it in the group, the Tea and Insights group, if anyone wants to see it there. A link to it there on my blog. But for me, forgiveness is such a cool thing. I'll just tell the story that I wrote about in the blog quickly. For me, it was 20 years ago, long before I knew anything about, the 3 principles or how the mind works or anything. And I've been married now for over 35 years or almost 35 years. I don't know, something like that, a long time. But about 20 years ago, my kids were fairly little. My husband was an engineer, a structural engineer, and decided for some reason he wanted to go to law school. That was fine, I guess, sort of. But, it sounds like a good thing, but it had a lot of implications to it. Because he went full time. We had some money in the bank that that ended up going to pay for the school. He wasn't working. I was a stay-at-home mom. So suddenly, always having enough money. We never needed a lot of money, but we had enough money that if we wanted to do something, we could do it. Suddenly having 3 kids, a husband who was completely consumed by law school because it's really, really hard and takes a lot of work, and no money coming in. And so and this was for 3 years, law school is 3 years, or I think his may have even been longer because it was a work study one too. But I had just built up so much resentment inside of me. I didn't really know it at the time, but it just, life seemed so hard to me, poor me. I was, it was like, every day the kids were little. My son was born during this time, which I still haven't figured out. It seemed like an immaculate conception because we hardly saw each other. And so at some point late, this was a few years after law school, things were still tough, because you don't get a great lawyer job right out of school. And so all of this had just built up in me for many years. And I was really feeling at the end of my rope one day. And this was in the 90s. And I had created a parenting chat room online, and I was in there complaining to whoever would listen to me, just saying like that, I'm at the end of my rope, I don't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. And someone in the chat room, I think it was a man, but I'm not even positive, just said, have you tried forgiveness? And I'm like, what do you mean? Have you forgiven him? Have you ever, have you thought of just forgiving him? And I'm like, well, I don't really understand. I mean, which seems odd that, I don't know how old I was, 30 something, young 30-something-year-old, to not really know what forgiveness was. I mean, I wasn't taught about forgiveness. Nobody in my family forgave people. It wasn't like a thing. I wasn't religious, so I didn't learn about it in that way. So I was really like curious, what is this thing, forgiveness? Obviously, I knew what the word was. And he just said, you just forgive him. And I'm like, well, that sounds easy enough. I'm like, but what do you have to do? Nothing. You just forgive them. It just means that you forgive them, and everything that happened. It's just a clean slate. It's like a new chapter in the book, in your book of your life. And I'm like, that sounds good. Sounds good to me. I was really naive, which was, I think, really useful and helpful to me. And the only thing I wasn't sure of, like, I thought I had to like actually talk to him and be like, oh, I forgive you. Because I mean, he didn't know, I don't know what he knew, that I had been miserable for all these years or not. And so I didn't want to make a deal of it. And the guy said, no, you can tell him if you want to, but you don't have to. And that was very appealing, because I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. Like, you can just do it and not even say anything. And so I did. And so I don't really recall what I did. Like, there wasn't any rituals. I didn't do anything, but I just somehow said it in my mind. I can't honestly remember, but I just forgave him like that night or that day. And I knew like it would like sort of start the next day. Kind of, there was something in me that, okay, from tomorrow on, that's it. It's all is forgiven. And it was amazing. It was really, really amazing. The next day, I saw him with new eyes. I mean, I can understand it now, like, sort of what happened. But at the time, it was beautiful and magical how I saw him with new eyes. And because of that, I acted more loving to him, because anything that had happened, it was in the past. It wasn't that it didn't happen. I knew everything that still happened. I didn't forget, but it just didn't have the same effect. So we were able to go forward with how things were at now forward. And it was just so magical. And then, every day I could just see the difference. I acted nicer to him. He acted nicer to me because of that. He was feeling more love from me, presumably. And just, the marriage itself just shifted. Life felt better to me. I didn't feel the need to, I was really like thinking, am I going to have to pack up my kids and just leave? I just couldn't take it anymore. And that was just gone, just gone. And I didn't tell him. And I only actually told him about this a few years ago. And I don't even, he didn't even think it was a big deal. I don't know. I don't think he really understood the gravity of it for me. But after that, like, I told everybody except him, like friends and stuff, when I would hear their stories about stuff, I'm like, forgive, just forgive them, and then everyone would be like, I can't forgive. No, that would be, selling my soul to the devil. And I'm like, no, it wouldn't be. Like, if you don't forgive, that's selling your soul to the devil. The devil is that part of you that, is holding on to these grudges. And I couldn't get it, because it was so simple for me. Like, I didn't understand why it would be so hard. No, I can't do it. Okay, you're lost. Because really, to me, that's all it is. Now today, with since that time, I mean, I never again, I mean, things again, of course, crop up through life, through marriage and everything else that need forgiving, but it wasn't a thing anymore. It was like after I knew how to do it, I guess, or I knew what it was just an ongoing thing in my life. Like I just didn't hold grudges, for long. I mean, yeah, I'd be mad or whatever for a certain amount of time and then move on. And I see now that was probably some form of forgiveness. And even today, like I see it more as almost the past doesn't even exist to me anymore. Like as soon as it's done, so there's nothing to forgive anymore. It's like it's hard to describe, but because there's only this moment, there's nothing. Whatever happens, and some bad and whatever things have happened, and it just doesn't stick. It doesn't stick to me the way it does for some people. So that's pretty much my story of it, and I'm happy to answer any questions or discuss it or hear your stories or whatever about it.
Cool. Thanks, Jill, for recapping what you've put in your blog. I'll make sure that there is a link to it as well on the recording, so that anyone can have a read and a listen. Because there's an audio version as well, so that's always helpful. Yeah, I love what you were saying around how you didn't really know what forgiveness was, and how that was probably useful because I think when you have an idea of what it is, which of course is going to be our own interpretation, like I was saying at the beginning, we can make it out to be some kind of like huge big thing, when really it's, for me, I see more and more it's more about not judging. That's kind of an element for me about forgiveness, because if I'm not in a state of judging whether something's good or bad, then there just doesn't seem to be like a hold on things. So yeah, I think when we have our own interpretation of what forgiving somebody means, that can also play a part in turning it into something more than what it is. And I know some people even go to the lengths of having like a forgiveness, these rituals or a practice. And I'm not knocking any practices, because I know there's quite a powerful one called a Ponopono that people really enjoy, and there's some kind of research into that. But I think when we recognize that this is something that occurs naturally, rather than something that you have to force yourself to do, I think that can help, because it's not, in my experience, I can't fake forgiving somebody. So you mentioned, Jill, that there can be some time where someone's behaved in a certain way, and for a while, that's whatever's going on, you kind of like it's alive in you. And if you were to, the whole idea of forgiveness probably isn't on the agenda in that in that moment, and then at some point it just is, and it just happens. Whereas I think we can fall into this idea that I must forgive, and almost try an effort forgiveness. Does that make sense?
And that's exactly where people seem to fail with it. It's like a half-hearted kind of forgiveness or something like that. They're not really forgiving. They're saying it. Okay, I forgive. But there's it's impossible to explain like what it really is, because it's not I guess it's not of this world somehow, it's almost like it's a formless thing. It's almost like I can see that now, but it's a switch that almost flips in your head, or it's almost like, like an insight. Like we can't explain an insight, but yet it's one that you can just do. I guess, but not everyone seems to be able to do it, just like not everyone gets an insight. But I see it now as similar to an insight where, you know how when you have an insight, suddenly everything changes. And that's exactly how it is with forgiveness. So in a way, it's very similar to that. Yeah. But yeah, the people say, you know, people have tried to forgive and they somehow can't. But it's that holding on. And I think the person who told me about it, you know, they really told me about that it's, you know, there's just no more holding on to whatever grievances you were holding on to. And that's the key. It's dropping. It's a letting go. It's a surrendering, I guess. You know, all those things we say about everything else in life. And it's cool that you can just do it. And it's so well worth just trying, I guess, if nothing else.
Yeah.
But people have a lot of baggage about it because they do put the meaning on it that it's it means it's okay to act that way, you know, or something like that. But it doesn't mean it's okay. And you can still, you know, you can still not be with a person too who's acting in ways you don't like, and you can still forgive them. You can forgive them after the fact. Like I have a friend whose husband left her after 10 years, and you know, she's already with a new person and is fine and happy, but she wants to be able to forgive her ex-husband, but there's something holding her back still, because of just things that he did that, you know, that she learned of later and things like that. And but you know, it's the holding on to that. It doesn't serve you. You know, it's not gonna matter to him whether or not she forgives him. She doesn't even see him anymore. But if, you know, it just would set her free to be able to just do it. But there's something that holds you back because you think that it means it was okay what he did. But it doesn't mean that. It's so interesting that it's really hard to describe this in words. You know, the more I'm trying, the more I see how difficult it is.
Well, let's see whether anyone's got any questions or comments thus far. Stunned into silence.
Catherine?
Catherine, yeah. Can you unmute yourself, Catherine, the bottom left?
Hello, lovely ladies.
Hello.
This is a great subject. I see it a little bit different in terms of what's happened for me. And it's difficult to put into words, but it has something to do with seeing my own psychological innocence, like really seeing it. And as I've come to see my own psychological innocence, it's enabled me to see other people's psychological innocence. And what I mean by that is I no longer see other people's behavior as something they're doing to me.
Yep.
And this has been huge for me. It's not about me, even when it looks like it's about me. It's about them being exactly who they are in the moment, thinking what they're thinking, believing what they're believing, and then acting from that place. Now, when I have clarity, I see that that has very little to do with me. It has actually nothing to do with me. Like zero.
Yep.
And this is really difficult to see when we don't have that clarity. So for me, as I get clarity in my life, I see myself less as a victim of anybody else's actions or behavior. And I've got 2 divorces under my belt. I've got some abusive relationships under my belt. I've got plenty of experience in terms of people treating me in ways that are less than what I consider kind. And the beauty of this understanding for me is that forgiveness has arisen effortlessly as clarity, as my thinking has cleared up. As I've grown in this understanding, It's a lived awareness that people's behavior isn't about me. And forgiveness naturally arises. In my experience, forgiveness has just shown up as a byproduct of that understanding. And that's really beautiful, because I, like you, I could never make, like, forgiveness was a great idea. It's a great idea. I understand that intellectually. And for years, I would have loved to have forgiven. You know, for instance, I would have loved to have been able to forgive my ex-husband who never had anything to do with my daughter growing up. That was a big one for me because of my maternal love for my daughter. I had a lot of judgments around her father not being a part of her life. And to be able to understand that that has nothing to do with me or her, that it has only to do with his thinking. There's so much compassion that arises in that. Like, I know that if he could have been there, he would have. We all would be, because who we truly are is love, and there's a lot of kindness and wisdom in the love that I think is our true nature. So as I've seen my innocence, and I do see it. I do believe our true nature is love, you know. But I've also been able to see how unloving some of my behaviors have been. And as I've forgiven myself, again, it's a clarity. It's seeing that reality of psychological innocence. I couldn't do anything other than what I did, believing what I believed at the time. You know, so that's my 2 cents. There's this beautiful, effortless quality as our clarity increases. For me, forgiveness has been a complete byproduct of that. That's arisen very naturally and effortlessly. And it's been the greatest gift of forgiveness has been it's a gift to me. I'm not carrying that. Like, I couldn't set that baggage down. If I told you how many times I tried to set that down myself, my little self, while I still thought they did all of that to me, it just was impossible. When I came to understand that they weren't doing it to me, they were in the world being themselves, living out of their own understanding. It's like, And once I saw that, it was just, they were forgiven. I just had so much compassion for all of us in there, for myself, for them, these innocent, confused human beings, not having a clue what it meant to love one another, living out of our own thinking. So I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And that's really, I think, how I see it as well today. But you expressed it so much. Well,
it's not like it's stabilized, and I never take anything personally. Of course I do, but it's so much quicker. It happens in the moment, and then because of this understanding, we know that we're each living out of this separate reality based on our thoughts and our beliefs, and we're acting out of that. And it's really beautiful when the clarity of mind and your own innate wisdom shows up and compassion and forgiveness is just a natural byproduct of that, of who we really are when we see things clearly. So it's beautiful. It's really,
I think it's actually what this understanding gives to people.
Yeah.
Because we talk about other, how do you, once you have this understanding, which you want to tell your husband, or you want to tell your mother, you want to tell all these people because they need to know this. But the beauty is, you don't have to tell them. The beauty is being able to see their innocence all the time. And that alone is all you need. Like, that is what we need to be teaching more people in this understanding. Because a lot of people, especially when you're new, you just want to tell everyone so that they can know it too. But they don't have to know this.
No, they don't even care.
No, but if we can see their psychological innocence, as you said,
when you're living that, everything. You're an anomaly. When you're actually living from that place and not taking things personally, people notice. I mean, we don't even realize what a huge contrast that is to the way most people are interacting in the world. And so if you're living from that level of clarity, people sit up and take notice. And that's, that creates the connection and then opportunities to share something, meaningful at times.
It's the gift that we give to the world, because I mean, it's so much that's the Course in Miracles really explained as well. I don't know if anyone's done any of that, but that's exactly it. I mean, it's all about forgiveness, and their brand of forgiveness is the same thing. It's not that you make an effort to forgive. It just means it didn't even happen. It doesn't exist. Yeah. It's their innocence. It's seeing the innocence in your brother, as they would say, and that's everything. And that's that gift that you give. There's a cosmic something about when you forgive somebody like that, whether they know it or not, like it does something for the whole and for their soul. Like there's like more, there's more to it than when we can see.
I think just love rushes in. And for me, I mean, that love rushes in, and just, I know that sounds kind of airy-fairy, but it's actually real. Katie Byron says something. She says, forgiveness is seeing what you thought happened didn't happen.
Yep.
Now that used to, excuse me, I know what happened, but what I thought, the story I created around what happened, really, when I'm clear about that and I'm honest about that, I can't find a single thing in my life that I didn't benefit from as soon as I took myself out of the victim identity. Like, that's real. The things that happen in my life taught me so much when I was willing to let go of the victim identity, if you know what I mean. But it was like, as soon as I took myself out of that position, there wasn't a single thing that I didn't benefit from in some way. So that's how I see her statement. What you thought happened didn't happen. Your life is happening for you. And it's a whole shift in perspective, and seeing that there's nothing that can happen that I won't grow and learn from and evolve from. And so it's impossible to see myself as a victim. And I've worked at a women's shelter. I've worked in frontline social work most of my adult life. I've been on the receiving end of some pretty terrible behavior. So it's not idealistic, and it isn't with any rose-colored glasses that I see that. But for me, it's true empowerment is to really see that. And that doesn't mean, and again, I love what you said, Jill, forgiveness does not mean that I throw myself in front of the bus or under the bus. It's like, if the dog bites, and there's a sign that says, do not enter, I'm not going into that yard. If I've been bit by that dog, I'm not sticking my hand out to it anymore. There's a lot of common sense, in that.
And yet the dog is just being a dog.
I love that dog. I can love that dog and not put my hand down towards it. Absolutely. Like, that's my experience, is that forgiveness is an inside job. It's an internal state of mind. It's a gift to myself. My heart opens up, and I'm not carrying the past. Again, like you said, the past just doesn't exist. But until I have that lived experience, I tend to carry it with me. But with forgiveness, and forgiveness happens for me with the clarity of mind, and then you really are living now in the present moment, fully available to whatever situation you're facing now, with an open heart. Your relationship now is no longer burdened by whatever it is you might have been carrying forward from past relationships. So that's the other gift of forgiveness, is that for me, the experience is I'm more fully available in the present moment. And my heart is wide open, not in a naive way, but in a very wise, clear way. So it's, again, the gift that keeps on giving to yourself. The tricky part is that you can't make yourself do it. It happens, again, for me, it's come as a byproduct of my own, I guess we could call it spiritual understanding or clarity of mind.
Yeah, when you see it clearly, when you see that it wasn't, you know, it wasn't what you thought it was, just like you said, it doesn't, you know, it wasn't somebody, it wasn't about you, you know, it's never about us, but we always think it's about us, because that's our lovely egos and thoughts. And then it's funny too, I've noticed, like, when I can have those moments of clarity and forgiveness, and, you know, everything's fine, but then a few days later, sometimes my ego mind comes back in and says, what's wrong with you? You know, you can't just, you know, let things like that slide by, you know. And I've started to sometimes question myself again, but luckily that doesn't usually last either. But it's funny how that, you know, that our personal thoughts love to buy into all of societal beliefs and stuff like that as well, you know. And God, talk to any friend and you're really screwed, because, you know, they'll help you remain a victim for as long as you want to remain a victim. But yeah, every blog post of mine basically is about that, how it's not happening to us. It's, you know, it's not whatever anyone else does. It's not about us. It's got nothing to do with us. Nothing. And
no, that's an amazing freedom in that. It's an incredible freedom. It's unimaginable freedom. It's like someone came to this planet to be what I want them to be. I know it, you know, and they married me. And and they made a promise. How come they're not, you know, how can I let them just be themselves? You know, the insanity of it. It's like, oh, you're not here on the planet to live up to my expectations. Like, I have to laugh at myself, even when I get caught in it again, you know, and it falls away very quickly, you know, that we none of us are here with it's so loving, really. It doesn't seem loving, but it's almost backwards. It's like everyone is here to be a perfect expression of themselves. And if that's true for me, it has to be true for all of those people that I was, you know, in a relationship with and am in a relationship with. And when I see that, again, you know, we're creating these separate realities based on our own stories, our own thoughts and beliefs, and then we're acting out of that. And the deeper I see that, the less I can take people's behavior personally. You know, even when they're saying something that's, you know, they're pointing it at me very specifically, you know, it doesn't stick, like you said, Jill, because I know where their behavior is coming from, the same place my behavior comes from, you know, and that's, we're all human in that sense. And some of us know that we're living out of that and are getting a little more freed up from it. And many people are still just, that is their reality. That is the only place they think they have to come from. So,
yeah.
I love what you're sharing there about seeing this from where we are, because I recognize that it can be such a distraction in wanting other people to see something. So in regards to forgiveness, I know in the past, I think I've had a tendency to, but I want the other person to get that they've done something. It's almost, you know, like done something wrong, or they've, you know, but then when you see that that's not what's going on. So the only, if I see their psychological innocence, then that's what's going to set me free, as opposed to needing them to see anything. I don't need anybody out there to be anything other than who they are in that moment. You know, I'm the one I'm looking out.
Yeah.
You know, this is I'm having my experience of life, and I can hold on to things, resentment, or you know, make up stories or whatever, but that's then happening. That's happening to me through me. So we can all, it's almost like we can live in our own paradise, or we can create this living hell within ourselves. And of course we're saying that you know, as humans we get caught, you know, we forget, we get caught up in our thinking or what have you. But just this understanding of knowing where my experience comes from just enables me to come back to center, home, whatever you want to call it, so much quicker. This kind of equilibrium, this balance, this innate well-being, I come back to it very quickly. And from that space of love, there is no, I suppose it's things like hate, resentment, grudges, they don't exist in that pure love. They're just not there.
If like, forgiveness is the free bonus.
Yeah,
you get forgiveness with it.
Yeah, it comes with it. Yeah, it comes with love. Because when I, just taking my twins for example, so they're nearly 3. They do some crazy ass stuff because they're as toddlers do. But I love them unconditionally. If they break something which perhaps I didn't want them to break, or they, you know, they make a mess or what have you, that love just covers every, there's you know what I mean? I couldn't hate them if I tried. It just doesn't, it can't coexist. Hate cannot coexist where there's unconditional love, and it just doesn't. So like you say, forgiveness is just a byproduct, part and parcel of living from this open-hearted, loving space. And yes, that might sound airy-fairy, woo-woo, but it is our natural state. It is our true nature is love. We are love. And when we recognize that, the rest all just kind of like, it's not even a falling away. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. The other interesting piece of that, what you're saying too, the unconditional love, like, it does go hand in hand. And a lot of people, similarly to forgiveness, they think that they unconditionally love, let's say, their partner, but they don't most of the time. There's so many conditions that they don't realize they put on them, and even their children too, as they, especially as they grow and they're not just so little. There's so many conditions, and it's all thought created too. You know, I only love you if, or when you make me happy, I love you. But as soon as you act like an idiot, I don't love you anymore. But it's not something you can fake. You know, you can't fake unconditional love, just like you can't fake forgiveness. They really do go hand in hand. And the other piece of what you guys were saying, like, the person who acts like a jerk, even if they don't say they know it or whatever, they're inside, they are beating themselves up and really hurting as well. And it doesn't help for us to put more on top of that. You know, they feel worse about it than we can even feel. I know that to be true. And it's such a gift if we aren't adding to their misery already. And it's the same with children. I think with children, like, if they do something bad, I mean, at a certain ages, you have to obviously teach them. But for the most part, with children growing up, like, you don't need to do much. You don't need to punish them a lot, or because they're already beating themselves up if they don't want to disappoint you and anyone else. And so if they've done something bad, it's usually enough for them. You know, you can talk about it or whatever, but I've just learned that it doesn't, you know, it's so easy to just forgive them and let them be able to forgive themselves too. And they usually aren't going to make the same mistake twice. Just like any human being, they learn from their mistakes.
Yeah, Jill, just touching on them forgiving ourselves, I wonder if that is a key piece, because if if you're not able to forgive yourself, it's like I can see that it would be difficult to forgive anyone else, because it's almost like you're when I ran up lots of debt from making lots of investments, I felt really like guilty about that, because of the various implications that could have on my life. So I would beat myself up about decisions that I'd made. But if I was to carry on judging myself and just feeling down on that, then it's almost giving me the right to kind of judge others, if that makes sense. So by me actually seeing my own innocence, seeing that I was acting out of from the information I had at the time and the understanding I had at the time, I was doing the best I could, what I thought was the best in that moment, what made sense to me in that moment. That's what I was doing. That's what we're only ever doing. And being able to see that and love myself for it, I can see now that being able to give myself that love, to hug myself, and has enabled me then to see, well, if this is happening here for me, it's happening everywhere else. I mean, I'm kind of saying what Catherine was speaking to, but I think sometimes we do think about forgiving others when we think about forgiveness. But actually, if we start from a place of how we care for ourselves and love ourselves and forgive ourselves, maybe that's an interesting starting point. I don't know what you guys think of.
Yeah, I mean that is, I think, a huge thing for people, that they're holding on to lots of stuff that they've done, and guilt and stuff like that. And it's exactly, I totally agree with you. It's in seeing that you did, what you could do given your thought in the moment, and that's, anyone with those same thoughts and conditioning and everything else that you have would have done that, because that's what happened. And being able to forgive yourself for that. And again, it's just you can't fake it either. We can say we forgive ourselves for it, but it's just a dropping of it, seeing that it doesn't exist. I mean, even that's what they do with prisoners and stuff like that. When people from the three principles go in and talk to prisoners, and they have so much guilt over, whatever crime it was that they did. And for them to see that, they did the best they could do at the moment. And, you hear of these stories, how they are set free from seeing that. And it's so true. It's just, there's so much of a piece where beyond the you did the thinking in the moment, but the past, seeing that there is no past. There's, like we can see that with our memories, how faulty they are. In general, you try to remember something, and then you hear somebody else's version of the same situation, and it's like, really? That happened? Like, our memories are so not correct. So there is no factual past there to even hold on to. But yeah, there's a lot of people that would feel a lot better in life if they could somehow see this and forgive themselves. And you're probably right that sort of needs to be done. If you're holding on to stuff about yourself, it's probably more difficult potentially to forgive others, or maybe not. Maybe some people can forgive others more easily than themselves. There's so many different characters out there with different ways of being. It would be so nice if, the average person out there just saw any little bit of this. There's so many victims out there, victim mentality people, and it's just, believing their thoughts and holding on to that victim mentality, because that's the identity that they come to know and be comfortable with. you know, you get attached to these identities, and that's all they know. I'm a victim, and then holding on to it, somehow thinking that that's helpful to them. Sad.
Yeah, just speaking to that, when somebody, it's almost like if you identify with a certain if something has happened to you in the past, and then from that experience you've identified as a victim, or whatever other label you might have given yourself, if it was maybe some sort of an abusive marriage or something, you've got that identity going on, and it's almost like forgiveness would basically unstable. It's like, well, who would I be if I did? Because it's like if that never happened, well, we're not saying that the actual experience didn't happen, but I think there can be this idea that forgiveness is saying, okay, well, that didn't happen then. Well, it's like, well, who am I now? And there can be a lot of with that identity of saying being a victim, they might be part of like certain groups and everything. You know what I mean? Your whole life can be built around a certain thing that's happened to you, and you don't want anything to kind of change that, because it's like, well, who would I be? But when we recognize that we're not our stories, we're not our persona, we're not what's happened to us, we're aware of it all, of course. But yeah, I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but I just have just this, yeah, I can see that there could be an element of wanting to hold on, because who we think we are, is attached to it. So who would I be if I just let it go? I can see that would feel really unsettling for somebody.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Jill. I was just going to say that I can understand what you're saying about sometimes how it's difficult to, or from my experience anyway, I find that when I'm flowing kind of in my natural state of being and in love, that forgiveness is just a kind of natural byproduct of that. It just happens naturally when I'm in that state. But when I am flowing kind of in my separate self, it can be difficult to forgive, because it does mean letting go of things that have happened in the past that I feel have kind of created that person that I'm needing to be when I'm in my separate self. Like if I'm struggling to connect to just like the oneness of being, and I'm kind of just feeling my thoughts in the moment and they feel really difficult, then kind of clinging on to that victim mentality can be kind of the only thing that keeps me going in that place. So what I've come to realise is that it's all fine. So I'm either, you know, if I do feel in flow and in love and having those wonderful positive feelings, and forgiveness is part of that, then that's wonderful and that's fine. But if I'm in a moment where I'm kind of in that victim mentality, then that's fine as well. I can just be aware of that and acknowledge that it's not true, but at that moment in time, that's kind of where I'm at, and that's okay. And that I'll naturally shed and flow back into oneness, and the forgiveness will come, and I'll kind of feel that love and that oneness again anyway. So I do think that forgiveness is just a natural state of being, and that also not being able to forgive is a natural state of being as well. It's all fine. It's all okay.
Mm-hmm. I think that's easy for us to say, though, you know, as we have this understanding, it all makes sense. Like it explains what happened to me 20 years ago, and it totally explains it all. But for somebody who doesn't get all that, or doesn't see it, that it's okay, there is something in the, well, just see if you can forgive kind of thing. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I just got lucky, and that, that's just another thing people can beat themselves up over because they can't forgive. But it does,
I
it
think
all flows together. Go ahead.
it absolutely does. I do think there's something to be said in kind of consciously surrendering, and you know, in accepting that sometimes carrying stuff, carrying resentment, isn't helpful, and that if you are able to get to a place where you can just consciously say, I don't need this anymore, and let that go, then I think that's wonderful. Absolutely.
It's interesting how there's you know, I feel like I sit between two worlds, and not just the form and the formless, or maybe it partially is, but you know, the regular people out there, and then you know, the 3P community people, because like you can have these conversations that, you know, even just people who read my book, sometimes I talk to them and they've gotten a little insight or something from it, but you know, they're still so, you know, looking for what can I do kind of thing. What can I do? And yeah, it's we definitely do need to get this word out, and yet we don't, because if we, you know, it's such a paradox. If we can see it all in them, it doesn't matter. It's, yeah, I don't know.
I liked what Catherine said in regards to that, because Catherine was sharing that when we you know, we all are the three principles anyway. That's, you know, whether you know that you are or not, we are. But when we see it clearly, we just naturally show up differently, and people can sense it. They see it. They, you know, like I've shared before that you know, my husband was saying I sound like a crazy person, and he was confused as to why I wasn't responding in a certain way, and maybe that meant I didn't care about him, and all of this. You know, it at first can seem odd to somebody else, because it looks so different, because it is this kind of more compassionate, loving, neutral space. But when I say neutral, you know, neutral as in that we're just not going kind of like having crazy emotions. It's just, you know, this holding this space of love, and people see it. So I think there is just a sense that we can go about our lives living what we know, and it will be having some sort of ripple effect with it, you know, probably without us even realizing it.
I think that's, yeah, that's it. We don't always realize it. I guess I'm in a frustrated place where you know, where I think that, where I start to wonder, well, you know, here I am all nice and calm and, but you're right. It totally does have an effect on people, and far beyond what we can imagine. Because if we're not reacting the way the rest of the world is reacting, you know, when a friend is talking to us or whatever, it has to help. It's got to.
Yeah, but I like what you were saying, Jill, about you know, the people who are on this call today already are in this conversation and exploring it, and probably most people that will watch it, you know, the same thing. But for anyone that doesn't come across this recording and is listening to it, because I will be putting it on YouTube, and it will have, you know, be about forgiveness. So anyone that is watching this that doesn't know about the three principles, the inside out understanding, what would you say to them as a kind of starting point with forgiveness?
Well, I think it's, like I said, when I didn't know anything about this stuff, it's really about, well, it's the same for so many things in life, is this, just kind of making a decision. And I don't know, maybe I'm different than most people, but like for me, when I make a real decision, like there's all kinds of decisions we make that we don't stick to because we never really made it for real. But like when you really make one, nothing can stop it from happening. And so for me, with that decision to forgive 20 years ago. I just did, you know, and I made that, and it was a real decision. And it was the same when I finally decided to lose weight, you know, 4.5 years ago, or 5 years ago almost now, to, you know, like I had thought about it. Yeah, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. But when I made that real decision and committed to it, it's a commitment thing. Like nothing can stop it from happening. And I think people need to do that more in life. It's like really just commit, you know, nothing can stop you if you really want something. Forgiveness, to have a better life, to not be a victim, you know, I mean, it's really it's a decision. If you don't want to be a victim, don't. This is why I have no coaching clients, because I just tell people to get over themselves and you know, and just don't do it anymore. You know, the Bob Newhart School of Coaching. Stop it. But it's that simple. Like that's it's funny because it really is that simple. But we put all these things around it. No, I can't.
I know that one of the
sorry, carry on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I know that one of the things that really helped me with kind of learning to forgive myself and other people was the understanding that by carrying kind of hate, resentment, anger towards others and myself, I was only actually hurting myself. And
that's it.
Yeah, and so it just made sense to try and let go of that in any way that I could, because it wasn't serving anyone at all in any way, shape or form. So yeah.
And sometimes we have to get to the end of our rope. That was it for me 20 years ago. I was at the end of my rope. And so there's nothing left to do. There's nothing to hold on to anymore. You are literally, you know, it's a good metaphor, the end of the rope. So it's either let go or I don't know. There's no other choice. You let go. And sometimes that is what pushes people into changing or forgiving. But forgiveness is for yourself. Like that's the piece, that's the missing piece that people, they may hear that and think it's a good idea, but it really, that's the truth of it. It's not for the mean person that's, you know, bugging you, or it's not for whatever. It's for you, because it's like it's a difference between feeling miserable in 1 second and then feeling wonderful in the next second. We have that capability. Like there's a switch in us that we can go from miserable to wonderful in a switch, like that. And it's just a change of reference in our minds. It's seeing, as Catherine said, that these things didn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's just our own minds playing tricks on us, which sounds like a crazy person. Oh, you're muted, Catherine. Catherine, you're
Dave
on
had
oh, there, you're good now.
It's a tricky one, you know, when you work with people who've suffered from really horrendous behavior at the hands of very confused human beings. It's not, for me, if we hear the truth in something, we're drawn to it. And that's what gives me hope. It's like, forgiveness isn't something I don't even know that it's a great idea to suggest it as a good idea to people. Like everybody already knows that. And if we could forgive, we would. But for me, forgiveness doesn't come until clarity comes. And that's such a insightful process. It's like this whole understanding that insights come from within. And as an insight occurs, then there's clarity of mind and a whole new way of seeing your own life and your own path in life happens. So, you know, it goes back to me to love and understanding. Anyone who's still hanging on to their story, I mean, it's real for them. And trauma from past events in terms of people being on the receiving end of some pretty horrific behavior. For me, again, love and understanding and offering a space. This whole idea of separate realities and the fact that people do terrible things, but it's based on their own thinking. and their own level of consciousness. So that doesn't in any way, it doesn't in any way excuse the behavior. It just gives understanding to where that behavior arises from. And in that understanding, there's a beautiful kind of freedom. And I call that freedom from the past, and I call that forgiveness. I don't take it personally anymore. And as soon as I don't take it personally, there is a forgiveness that arises in that clarity. So
Yeah.
I think we all come to, when we hear the truth, something inside of us wakes up to the truth that we're hearing, because we are that, and we have that within us. So as we go out and live with less baggage, and we are affecting the world around us just by the lightness of our being. And in my experience, people are drawn to that when something within them wakes up, and they want to explore something beyond their own story about life. So that's sort of where the hope comes for me, is as we live and go out into the world, as we said already, the ripple effect is just happening really naturally, in ways that we often aren't aware of, but can trust. So
yeah, if people are ready, that's a key thing, if they're ready for this. And I love what you said about the separate realities, because to me if that's the one thing people could understand and know, because that's the one thing people really, most average person has really no clue about separate realities. And to see that a little bit, and to just look for proof of that in your life, that we're all living in our own reality, that alone would naturally, forgiveness can bubble up from that, because we're in separate realities. Yeah. So that's probably the first thing to, that if somebody's interested in learning anything about this, is just to start to see how what you believe and think is not the same as what everybody else in the world believes and thinks. Everybody believes and thinks their own flavor of what life is all about.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect piece to end on. So, and if there are any other blog posts or videos or things like that, Jill, that you can think of that would be useful to accompany this webinar, then let me know, and I will attach them as well to the.
So many. I mean, just any of my blog posts are about this whole, the not specifically forgiveness, but just the fact that it's not about you. That what other people do. But yeah, if people wanted to just check out whatdidyoudo.jill.com, you'll find a whole treasure trove of the same thing in different words over and over and over again.
But no, that's the cool thing. One thing that certainly has helped me, and I found really useful, is to read the same thing over and over and over again. It's kind of like, because each way of saying the same thing, I don't know, you just hear something different. Or even if I was to read the same blog over and over again, each time you just hear something a little bit different, because each time you're coming to it in a different state of mind than you were the previous time you read it. We're constantly in flux, aren't we? There's a constant that we are, but then we have this with our whatever thought is taking form in the moment, just gives us that slightly different perspective. So that's a key piece, I think, to just stay in the conversation, keep just kind of revisiting things and exploring. That's what I found useful anyway.
And I'm happy if anyone wants to have a chat. I'm happy to just tell them to stop at any time.
And sometimes that is an amazing thing. I know I've definitely enjoyed somebody just calling me out, and just because I couldn't see it, and then someone just kind of like tapping me on the shoulder and just saying, stop it. Oh, right. Yeah, I'm making it up. Oh my goodness. I just, hadn't seen it. So I think there is a time, and we kind of, yeah, there's a time and a place where we can be quite blunt and frank with people. And then there's other times when we know that it's just about holding space, bebeing compassionate, and
Then call Catherine.
yeah. I just saw, before we finish, I just saw Chris put his hand up there. Do you want to just unmute yourself, Chris? And yeah.
Yeah, just so I'm not just a voyeur, I thought I'd at least participate a little bit. But, you know, Jill, you were talking about like coaching clients and, you know, oh, joking, that's why I don't have any, because I say stop it. But you do listen to it before you say stop it. And that back and forth and that listening and that interaction has, you know, that, I think that's part, you know, sometimes people have to, you know, they have to get out of a room by themselves and share it so that you can say stop it.
That is true. Sometimes just the getting it out of them and someone to listen to is often helpful. And that's, as Catherine said, the holding space for them too.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's the speaking of the it, whatever it is, that you're then able to see it for what it really is. That it's a, you know, it's a story, it's something we're holding on to, something we're making up, and but unless we actually, sometimes we just need to kind of like speak it, then we can see it. Ah, right, yeah. So
Jill has listened to me for quite a while.
So she's told you to stop it a few times.
Yes.
Thank you, Sara, for having this chat with me, and thank you all. I think Catherine already left, but it was great to talk about this stuff, and thanks for holding the space for that.
You're very welcome. I love having conversations with you, Jill. You're so generous with what you share, and obviously to having the blog that you have. So yeah, thank you everyone who's joined live, and for everyone watching the recording. And yeah, bye for now. See you next time.
Bye everyone.
Bye bye.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Sara.
Thank you.